Admiral Sarah Chen stood at the edge of the runway, watching the sleek F-22 Raptors taxi into position for morning drills. The Nevada sun beat down on the tarmac at Nellis Air Force Base, creating heat waves that made the aircraft shimmer like mirages. At 45, she commanded respect from every pilot, mechanic, and officer under her authority, yet something gnawed at her confidence today. The promotion to Admiral had come with unexpected challenges. While her peers celebrated her achievement, as the first Asian American woman to reach this rank in fighter aviation, Sarah found herself questioning whether she truly belonged in this position. The weight of representation felt heavier than any aircraft she had ever piloted. Her assistant, Lieutenant Colonel Martinez, approached with the daily briefing folder. "Ma'am, the new pilot assignments are ready for your review. The squadron leaders are requesting permission to begin advanced tactical training next week." Sarah nodded, flipping through the papers. Fresh faces stared back at her from personnel photos. Young pilots eager to prove themselves in the most advanced fighter jets ever built. She remembered that same hunger, that desperate need to belong in a world where few looked like her. 23 years ago, she had been one of those eager faces. Fresh out of the Air Force Academy, she had arrived at her first base with dreams of becoming the best pilot in the squadron. The other pilots had looked at her with barely concealed skepticism. A woman in the cockpit was still unusual then, and an Asian American woman even more so. But Sarah had something they didn't expect, an almost supernatural ability to understand the F-22's complex systems. While others struggled with the aircraft's advanced avionics, she seemed to communicate with the machine on an intuitive level. Her flight instructors noticed it first during training simulations. She could execute maneuvers that left seasoned pilots shaking their heads in amazement. The breakthrough came during her third month of active duty. A routine training exercise had gone wrong when another pilot's aircraft experienced engine failure over the desert. Standard protocol called for emergency landing procedures, but the terrain below offered no safe options. Sarah had volunteered to escort the disabled aircraft, using her Raptor to create a windshield that allowed the other pilot to glide safely to a distant airstrip. The rescue had earned her the attention of her commanding officer, Colonel Williams. He had called her into his office the next morning, his weathered face serious behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Chen, what you did yesterday was either incredibly brave or completely reckless. I haven't decided which yet." Sarah had stood at attention, unsure if she was about to receive a commendation or a reprimand. "Sir, I saw an opportunity to help a fellow pilot and took it. That maneuver you pulled, using your aircraft's wake, to stabilize his glide path, and where did you learn that?" Colonel Williams had leaned forward, genuinely curious. "I didn't learn it anywhere, sir. It just seemed like the right thing to do in the moment." The colonel had studied her for a long moment before speaking again. "Chen, in 30 years of flying, I've seen a lot of good pilots. But what you did yesterday suggests something special. I'm recommending you for advanced tactical training." That recommendation had changed everything. Within 6 months, Sarah was flying missions that pushed both her skills and her aircraft to their absolute limits. She developed a reputation for impossible saves and brilliant tactical decisions. Other pilots began seeking her advice, and her confidence grew with each successful mission. But success brought its own challenges. The higher she climbed in rank, the more isolated she felt. Command positions meant fewer opportunities to fly and more time behind a desk. She missed the pure joy of being airborne, the feeling of perfect unity between pilot and machine. Now standing on the tarmac as an admiral, Sarah wondered if she had lost touch with what made her special in the first place. The young pilots, preparing for takeoff, represented the future of fighter aviation. But did they see her as an inspiration or just another bureaucrat in uniform? A sudden commotion near the flight line caught her attention. One of the Raptors had developed a hydraulic leak, and the ground crew was working frantically to diagnose the problem. The pilot, a young woman named Captain Rodriguez, climbed out of the cockpit looking frustrated and disappointed. Sarah watched the scene unfold, remembering her own early disappointments. Every setback had felt like proof that she didn't belong, that the skeptics were right. She had learned to channel that frustration into determination, but it had taken years to develop that resilience. As the morning progressed, Sarah found herself thinking about her call sign. the nickname that had defined her identity as a pilot. Every aviator earned their call sign through their actions, personality, or sometimes pure accident. Hers had come during a particularly challenging training exercise, and it had stuck with her throughout her career. The irony wasn't lost on her, that the very thing that had once made her famous among pilots was now just a memory, a piece of her past that felt increasingly distant from her current reality as an administrator. She began to wonder if her legendary status was built on achievements that no longer mattered in her present role. The doubt crept in slowly but persistently. Maybe the skeptics had been right all along. Maybe her success had been more luck than skill, and now that luck was running out. The thought terrified her more than any enemy aircraft or dangerous mission ever had. As the sun climbed higher, casting sharp shadows across the base, Admiral Sarah Chen made a decision that would change everything. She would need to prove to herself that she still belonged in the sky, that her legendary reputation was built on solid ground. The question was whether she had the courage to put everything on the line one more time. The call came at 800 hours the next morning. Admiral Chen was reviewing budget reports when Lieutenant Colonel Martinez burst into her office without knocking. A breach of protocol that immediately told her something serious was happening. "Ma'am, we have a situation developing in international airspace. Pentagon wants you on a secure line immediately." Sarah's pulse quickened as she reached for the encrypted phone. The voice on the other end belonged to General Harrison, her superior at the Pentagon. His tone was grim and urgent. "Sarah, we need your expertise on this one. 3 hours ago, our satellites detected unusual aircraft activity near the disputed islands in the South Pacific. We've got unidentified fighters testing our response times, probing our defenses." She grabbed a pen, ready to take notes. "What's the current threat assessment, sir?" "Unknown at this time. These aircraft are using advanced stealth technology we haven't seen before. Our regular reconnaissance flights can't get close enough for positive identification without risking international incident. We need someone with your experience to lead a discreet observation mission." Sarah felt her heart racing. This was exactly the kind of mission she had excelled at during her active flying years. "Sir, with respect, wouldn't Captain Morrison or Colonel Stevens be better suited for field command? I haven't flown combat missions in over 2 years." There was a pause before General Harrison responded. "Sarah, these bogies are flying patterns that match your old tactical reports from the Persian Gulf operations. Whoever is out there seems to know our standard response protocols. We need someone who thinks outside the box, someone who can improvise when the situation goes sideways." The weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders. This wasn't about paperwork or administrative decisions. Lives could be at stake, and the Pentagon was asking her to dust off skills she wasn't sure she still possessed. "How many aircraft are we talking about, sir?" 4 unidentified fighters, possibly more. They appear and disappear from our radar in ways that shouldn't be possible. Our intelligence suggests this might be a test of new stealth technology, but we can't be certain without closer observation. Sarah found herself already thinking tactically, her mind automatically calculating flight patterns, fuel consumption, and optimal approach vectors. The familiar mental process felt like putting on a comfortable old jacket. "What's our response window, General?" 12 hours, maybe less. These aircraft have been probing our defenses for 3 days now, each time getting bolder. Washington wants answers before they decide whether this constitutes a direct threat to national security. The implications were enormous. If these were enemy aircraft testing American defenses, the situation could escalate quickly into something much more serious. But if they moved too aggressively based on incomplete information, they could trigger the very conflict they were trying to avoid. After ending the call, Sarah sat in silence for several minutes, staring at the mission parameters she had scribbled on her notepad. The logical choice would be to assign the mission to one of her squadron commanders and coordinate from the ground. That's what admirals were supposed to do, make strategic decisions and let younger pilots handle the dangerous flying. But something deep inside her rebelled against that logic. She had built her reputation on being the pilot who could handle impossible situations, the one who saw solutions others missed. How could she ask someone else to take risks she wasn't willing to take herself? Her intercom buzzed. "Ma'am, Captain Rodriguez is here to see you. She says it's urgent. Send her in." Captain Rodriguez entered with barely contained excitement. "Admiral, I heard about the mission briefing. I know I'm not supposed to know the details, but the mechanics are prepping 4 Raptors for extended range operations. Ma'am, I volunteer to lead this mission. Sarah studied the young pilot's eager face. Rodriguez had graduated top of her class from the academy and shown exceptional skill in training exercises. She was exactly the kind of pilot who should be handling dangerous reconnaissance missions. Captain, what makes you think you're ready for this level of responsibility? Ma'am, I've studied every mission report from your career. I know how you handled the situation over the Strait of Hormuz in 2019 and the rescue operation during Hurricane Patricia. I've trained for scenarios exactly like this one. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. This brilliant young pilot had studied her missions, learned from her tactics, and was now ready to surpass her achievements. It should have made her proud, but instead it drove home how far she had drifted from her roots as a combat pilot. Rodriguez, theoretical knowledge and actual combat experience are 2 very different things. When you're alone in hostile airspace with unknown aircraft testing your reactions, textbook solutions don't always apply. Then teach me, ma'am. Come with us. Show us how it's really done. The suggestion hung in the air between them. Sarah could see the hope in Rodriguez's eyes, the desperate desire to learn from someone she clearly viewed as a legend. But accepting would mean admitting that she was no longer content with her administrative role. That part of her missed the adrenaline and immediate purpose of active flying. Captain, what you're suggesting goes against standard command protocol. Admirals don't fly reconnaissance missions. But you're not just any admiral, ma'am. You're Phoenix. The use of her old call sign sent a jolt through Sarah's system. She hadn't heard it spoken aloud in months. And hearing it from Rodriguez somehow made it feel real again. Made her remember why she had earned that name in the first place. Phoenix, the call sign had come during a mission over hostile territory when her aircraft had taken significant damage from surface-to-air missiles. Standard procedure called for immediate retreat to friendly airspace, but Sarah had recognized that completing the mission was critical for the safety of ground forces below. She had nursed her damaged Raptor through enemy airspace, gathering crucial intelligence while flying on backup systems and emergency power. When she finally reached safety, her aircraft was so badly damaged that it had to be completely rebuilt. But the intelligence she had gathered saved dozens of lives and led to the successful completion of the operation. The mechanics had joked that her aircraft had risen from its own ashes, and the name Phoenix had stuck. Over the years, it had come to represent her ability to succeed when others would have failed, to find solutions in impossible situations. Now, sitting across from Captain Rodriguez, Sarah realized that her call sign represented more than just past achievements. It embodied an approach to flying and leadership that was still relevant, still needed. Captain, preparing for this mission will require absolute precision. Every system check, every flight parameter, every contingency plan must be perfect. Are you prepared for that level of preparation? Rodriguez's eyes lit up. Yes, ma'am, absolutely. Sarah made her decision. Then we begin immediately. And Captain, you're about to learn why they called me Phoenix. The pre-flight briefing room buzzed with nervous energy as Sarah entered at 600 hours. 4 pilots stood at attention: Captain Rodriguez, Major Thompson, Lieutenant Collins, and Captain Park. Each had been hand-selected for their specific skills, but none had experience with the type of mission they were about to undertake. At ease, Sarah commanded, moving to the front of the room where satellite imagery and tactical displays covered every available wall surface. What we're about to discuss does not leave this room. The mission we're planning could determine whether we're looking at a new threat to national security or simply aggressive testing of our response capabilities. She activated the main display, showing a detailed map of the disputed islands and surrounding international waters. Red markers indicated the last known positions of the unidentified aircraft. Intelligence reports suggest these aircraft are using stealth technology that's more advanced than anything in our current database. They appear on radar for brief moments, then vanish completely. Standard tracking methods have been ineffective. Major Thompson raised his hand. Ma'am, what's our rules of engagement if these aircraft prove hostile? Observation only unless directly threatened. Our job is to gather intelligence, not start a war. But make no mistake, these pilots have been testing our defenses with increasing boldness. They know we're watching and they don't seem concerned about our presence. Sarah moved to the next display, showing flight patterns and timing data. The pattern analysis suggests they're not random encounters. These aircraft appear at specific intervals, following flight paths that probe different aspects of our defensive capabilities. Someone is conducting a very methodical assessment of our readiness. Lieutenant Collins studied the data intently. Admiral, the timing suggests they have real-time intelligence about our patrol schedules. How is that possible? The question hung heavy in the room. If hostile forces had access to classified flight schedules, it suggested either a serious intelligence breach or surveillance capabilities beyond anything they had previously encountered. That's exactly what we need to find out, Collins. Which brings me to our approach strategy. Sarah activated a tactical simulation on the main screen. Traditional formation flying won't work for this mission. These aircraft have demonstrated they can detect our standard approaches long before visual contact. We need to think differently. She began outlining a complex flight pattern that would take advantage of atmospheric conditions, terrain masking, and electronic countermeasures to approach the target area undetected. Captain Rodriguez, you'll take point position, but you won't be leading the formation in the traditional sense. Your job is to draw their attention while the rest of us position for observation from multiple angles. Rodriguez nodded, though Sarah could see the tension in her posture. Being the decoy in an operation like this required nerves of steel and absolute trust in your wingmates. Major Thompson, you'll approach from the southeast, using the storm front as cover. The weather radar interference should mask your approach until you're in optimal observation range. Thompson studied the meteorological data. Ma'am, flying through that storm system will be challenging even for an experienced pilot. The turbulence readings are off the charts, which is exactly why they won't expect it, Sarah replied. Sometimes the most dangerous approach is the safest, because it's the last thing your opponent anticipates. She continued assigning positions and responsibilities to each pilot, creating a web of observation points that would provide comprehensive intelligence while minimizing the risk of detection. But as she spoke, Sarah realized she hadn't assigned herself a position in the formation. Captain Park noticed the omission first. Admiral, what's your position in the formation? Sarah hesitated. According to protocol, she should be coordinating from the ground, managing the mission from the safety of the command center. But looking at these young pilots, she knew that wasn't where she belonged. I'll be taking the most dangerous position, she said finally. Direct approach to the target aircraft. While you gather intelligence from a distance, I'll attempt to get close enough for visual identification. The room fell silent. What she was proposing went against every safety protocol in the book. The unknown aircraft had already demonstrated advanced capabilities. Approaching them directly could be suicide. Ma'am, Rodriguez said carefully, shouldn't that be my assignment? I'm the most expendable member of the team. Sarah's expression hardened. Captain, no member of this team is expendable. And the direct approach requires experience with contact protocols and threat assessment that can only come from years of combat flying. This isn't about courage. It's about having the right pilot in the right position. Major Thompson stepped forward. Admiral, with respect, your loss would be devastating to the entire operation. If something happens to you, who takes command? Rodriguez does, Sarah answered without hesitation. She's been studying my tactics longer than any of you. If the situation goes bad, she has the best understanding of how to adapt and survive. The vote of confidence clearly meant everything to Rodriguez, but it also added pressure to an already high-stakes mission. Sarah could see the young pilot's mind racing, calculating contingencies and emergency procedures. There's something else you need to understand, Sarah continued. These unknown aircraft aren't just testing our technology. They're testing our resolve. Every time we've responded with standard procedures, they've adapted and pushed harder. They're learning from our reactions. She moved to a new display showing communication intercepts and signal analysis. Intelligence suggests they're recording our radio communications, analyzing our tactical decisions in real time. That means we can't rely on standard protocol for this mission. Lieutenant Collins frowned at the implications. Ma'am, if they're monitoring our communications, how do we coordinate during the mission? Simplified hand signals and prearranged maneuvers only. Once we're airborne, assume every word is being recorded and analyzed. We'll operate under communication silence except for absolute emergencies. The complexity of the mission was becoming clear to everyone in the room. They would be flying blind in terms of coordination, facing an unknown enemy with advanced capabilities, while trying to gather intelligence without triggering an international incident. Sarah could see doubt creeping into some of the pilots' faces. This was exactly the kind of mission that could end careers or lives. But it was also the kind of mission that separated great pilots from merely good ones. "I know what you're thinking," she said, reading their expressions. "This mission involves more unknowns than any of us are comfortable with. But that's exactly why it requires pilots who can think beyond their training, who can improvise when the situation doesn't match the textbook." She paused, letting her gaze move across each face in the room. "I'm not going to lie to you, this is dangerous. But it's also necessary. Those aircraft represent a potential threat to every base, every ship, every aircraft in our Pacific fleet. We need to know what we're dealing with before they decide to move from testing to action." Captain Rodriguez straightened her shoulders. Decision made. "Admiral, when do we launch?" Sarah checked her watch. They had been preparing for 3 hours, but the real work was just beginning. Final equipment checks at 1400 hours. Briefing with weather and intelligence at 1500. Launch at 1630. As the pilots filed out to begin their preparations, Sarah remained behind, staring at the tactical displays. In 8 hours, she would be back in the cockpit of an F-22, facing unknown aircraft with potentially hostile intent. The thought both terrified and excited her in equal measure. For the first time in months, Admiral Sarah Chen felt like Phoenix again. The F-22 Raptor felt different beneath Sarah's hands than she remembered. 2 years of administrative work had dulled some of her muscle memory, and the sophisticated controls that had once felt like extensions of her own body now required conscious thought. As she ran through the pre-flight checklist, doubt crept into her mind like static interference. "Phoenix, this is Tower. Weather update shows storm front moving faster than predicted. You'll have a narrow window for optimal cover conditions." Sarah's throat caught at hearing her call sign over the radio again. The control tower crew had dug through old records to find her operational designation. A gesture that meant more than they could know. "Copy that. Tower. Phoenix flight ready for departure in 60 seconds. Through her canopy, she could see the other 4 Raptors lined up on the taxiway. Each pilot was running through their own final checks. But she knew they were all thinking the same thing. This mission was unlike anything they had trained for. The unknown aircraft they were about to investigate represented technology that could potentially outclass even their advanced fighters. The radio crackled with Rodriguez's voice. "Phoenix Lead Reaper 2 ready for departure." Her call sign, earned during a training exercise where she had systematically eliminated an entire squadron in simulated combat, reflected her methodical precision in tactical situations. "Phoenix Lead. Ghost 3 ready." Major Thompson's call sign came from his ability to appear and disappear on radar during training exercises, using terrain and weather to mask his aircraft's signature. "Phoenix Lead. Blade 4 ready." Lieutenant Collins had earned his designation through aggressive flying that cut through enemy formations like a knife. "Phoenix Lead. Steel 5 ready." Captain Park's call sign reflected both his unshakable nerves and his Korean heritage, honoring his grandfather who had fought in the Korean War. Sarah felt a familiar surge of pride and responsibility. These pilots trusted her leadership, but more than that, they represented the future of fighter aviation. Each had skills that in some ways exceeded her own, yet they looked to her for guidance based on experience they had only read about in mission reports. "Tower. Phoenix Flight requesting clearance for departure. Phoenix Flight, you are cleared for takeoff. Weather window optimal for the next 47 minutes. The Raptor's twin engines spooled up with a sound like controlled thunder. Sarah felt the familiar pressure as 22,000 pounds of thrust pushed her back into her seat. The sensation was like greeting an old friend. Everything came flooding back in an instant. As her aircraft lifted off the runway, muscle memory took over. Her hands found the optimal throttle settings automatically. Her eyes tracked the horizon and instrument readings in the efficient pattern she had developed over thousands of flight hours. For the first time in years, Admiral Sarah Chen felt completely at home. The flight to the target area would take 90 minutes, most of it over open ocean. Sarah used the time to review intelligence reports one final time, but also to reconnect with the pure joy of flight that had first drawn her to aviation. Below, the Pacific stretched endlessly in all directions, its surface broken by whitecaps that looked like scattered diamonds from 30,000 feet. "Phoenix Lead. Ghost 3. Storm front ahead looks nastier than forecasted. Turbulence readings are spiking." Thompson was right. The meteorological conditions were deteriorating faster than predicted. The storm system they had planned to use for cover was intensifying, creating flight conditions that would challenge even experienced pilots. But those same conditions would provide perfect concealment for their approach. Copy that, Ghost 3. All aircraft, prepare for weather penetration. Remember, radio silence once we reach the target area. As they approached the storm front, Sarah felt her aircraft begin to buck and roll in the turbulent air. Flying through severe weather required a delicate balance. Too aggressive on the controls and you could overstress the aircraft. Too passive, and you could lose control entirely. She found herself settling into the rhythm of storm flying, her body automatically compensating for the aircraft's movements. The storm was both beautiful and terrifying. Lightning illuminated towering thunderheads from within, creating an otherworldly landscape of light and shadow. Her radar showed cells of intense precipitation that could damage even a military aircraft if encountered at high speed. But threading between these dangers, she found corridors of relatively calm air that allowed steady progress toward their destination. Phoenix lead. Reaper 2. I'm reading intermittent radar contacts bearing 090. Range approximately 40 miles. Rodriguez had spotted them first, the mysterious aircraft that had been probing American defenses for the past week. Sarah's pulse quickened as she adjusted her sensors to focus on the bearing Rodriguez had indicated. Confirmed. Reaper 2. Multiple contacts, erratic movement patterns. Through her advanced radar display, Sarah could see 4 distinct aircraft signatures appearing and disappearing like ghosts. Their movement patterns were unlike anything in her experience. They seemed to flicker in and out of existence, suggesting stealth technology even more advanced than the Raptor's own sophisticated systems. The formation began their carefully planned approach sequence. Rodriguez broke left to begin her decoy run, while Thompson disappeared into the storm system for his southeastern approach. Collins and Park took positions that would provide overlapping fields of observation, creating a net of sensors around the unknown aircraft. Sarah began her direct approach, the most dangerous part of the mission. She would fly straight toward the unidentified fighters, appearing to be a standard reconnaissance patrol while actually gathering detailed intelligence on their capabilities and intentions. As she closed to within 20 miles, her threat warning systems began to chirp. The unknown aircraft had detected her presence and were reacting to her approach. But instead of the aggressive maneuvering she expected, they seemed to be positioning themselves for observation. It struck her suddenly that she might not be the hunter in this scenario. She might be the hunted. These aircraft had been probing American defenses, learning response patterns and capabilities. Her approach might be exactly what they had been waiting for. The realization sent a chill down her spine. If these pilots had been studying American tactics as thoroughly as the intelligence suggested, they would know about her reputation, her call sign, possibly even her specific combat history. They might have chosen this moment specifically because they wanted to test themselves against the pilot known as Phoenix. At 15 miles, she got her first visual contact. The aircraft ahead were unlike anything in current military databases, sleek, angular designs that seemed to blend seamlessly with the stormy sky around them. Their formation was loose but disciplined, suggesting pilots with significant training and experience. Sarah's radio remained silent as planned, but her mind was racing. These weren't test pilots or reconnaissance aircraft. They were fighters positioned and ready for combat. The question was whether they intended to engage or were simply evaluating her capabilities. At 10 miles, the lead aircraft turned directly toward her. The movement was deliberate, challenging, almost like a formal invitation to aerial combat. Sarah felt her heart rate spike as years of training and instinct prepared her body for the fight of her life. She was no longer Admiral Chen, naval commander and administrator. She was Phoenix, and these unknown pilots were about to learn why that name had become legend. The lead unknown aircraft began a slow, deliberate roll, a universal aviation signal that could mean either peaceful intentions or preparation for aggressive maneuvering. Sarah had split seconds to decide how to interpret the gesture and respond accordingly. Her training screamed at her to maintain defensive positioning, to keep her distance and gather intelligence as planned. But her instincts, honed through decades of combat flying, told her something different was happening here. These pilots weren't just testing American defenses, they were testing her specifically. At 8 miles, she made a decision that would have given her superiors heart attacks if they had known about it. She rolled her Raptor in response to the unknown aircraft's signal, then executed a brief vertical climb before leveling off. It was a classic acknowledgement in fighter pilot culture, a way of saying, "I see you and I'm ready for whatever comes next." The response was immediate and unexpected. The four unknown aircraft formed up into a diamond formation and began a series of precision maneuvers that demonstrated flying skills Sarah had rarely encountered. They moved as if connected by invisible wires, each aircraft responding to the other's movements with perfect synchronization. Sarah found herself watching a display of aerial artistry that was both beautiful and intimidating. These pilots weren't just skilled, they were exceptional. Their aircraft technology was clearly advanced, but it was their flying ability that truly impressed her. Through her headset, she heard Rodriguez's voice break radio silence. "Phoenix Lead Reaper 2, are you seeing this? Those maneuvers shouldn't be possible given the weather conditions." Rodriguez was right. The storm system that had provided cover for their approach was creating turbulence that should have made formation flying extremely difficult. Yet these unknown pilots were executing complex maneuvers as if the weather were perfectly calm. Sarah keyed her radio briefly. "Maintain position, Reaper 2, continue observation." But her mind was racing beyond the immediate tactical situation. If these aircraft could perform this well in adverse conditions, what were their capabilities in ideal weather? More importantly, what did their presence here really mean? At 6 miles, the formation suddenly split apart, each aircraft taking a different vector. Sarah realized she was being surrounded, not aggressively, but with the kind of precision that suggested these pilots knew exactly what they were doing. They were creating a three-dimensional observation platform around her aircraft. Her threat warning systems remained quiet, indicating no weapons lock or hostile intent. But the tactical situation was clear. She was completely surrounded by aircraft of unknown capability and intention. Then something extraordinary happened. The lead aircraft, now positioned directly ahead of her, began transmitting on an emergency frequency. Not words, but a series of tones that Sarah recognized from her early training. It was International Aviation Code, numbers that spelled out a grid coordinate. Sarah quickly plotted the coordinates on her navigation display. They indicated a position approximately 50 miles southwest of their current location. Empty ocean as far as intelligence knew, but apparently significant to these mysterious pilots. The transmission repeated 3 times, then stopped. The lead aircraft performed another role, this one more elaborate and clearly ceremonial in nature. Sarah found herself responding almost automatically, executing her own sequence of rolls and climbs that had once been her signature moves during airshow demonstrations. What followed was 20 minutes of the most extraordinary flying Sarah had ever experienced. The unknown pilots began demonstrating maneuvers that pushed the boundaries of physics and engineering. They showed her aircraft capabilities that shouldn't exist with current technology, flying patterns that required perfect harmony between pilot skill and machine performance. But more than just showing off, they seemed to be communicating. Each maneuver was clearly deliberate, designed to convey information about their aircraft's capabilities and their own skills as pilots. Sarah found herself responding in kind, demonstrating some of her own advanced techniques. It was like a conversation conducted in the language of flight, a dialogue between masters of their craft that transcended nationality, politics, or potential hostility. For those precious minutes, Sarah felt pure joy in flying again, the same feeling that had first drawn her to aviation decades earlier. The exchange ended as suddenly as it had begun. The 4 aircraft reformed into their diamond pattern and began accelerating away from her position. But before disappearing entirely, the lead aircraft executed one final maneuver, a complex sequence of rolls and climbs that Sarah recognized with shock. It was her own signature move, the aerial maneuver she had developed during her early career and used in numerous combat situations. These pilots didn't just know about her reputation, they had studied her specific techniques in detail. As the unknown aircraft disappeared into the storm clouds, Sarah found herself alone in the turbulent sky, her mind reeling from what had just occurred. She had come here expecting a routine reconnaissance mission, but instead had experienced something that challenged everything she thought she knew about aviation and aerial combat. Her radio crackled with voices from her formation. "Phoenix Lead Ghost 3. We recorded the entire encounter. The performance capabilities we just witnessed shouldn't be possible with any known technology. Phoenix Lead Blade 4. Those maneuvers violated basic physics. I've never seen aircraft move like that in weather conditions this severe. Phoenix lead, Steel 5. The coordination between those aircraft was perfect. Either they have communication systems beyond anything we know about, or those pilots have trained together for thousands of hours. Sarah gathered her thoughts before responding. All aircraft reform on me. We'll conduct detailed debrief back at base. Maintain radio silence regarding technical observations until we reach secure communications. But privately, she was struggling to process what had just happened. Those pilots had sought her out specifically, had demonstrated capabilities that suggested military aviation was on the verge of a technological revolution she had known nothing about. The coordinates they had transmitted were clearly an invitation. But to what? As her formation began the flight back to Nellis, Sarah found herself thinking about her call sign again. Phoenix represented her ability to rise from difficult situations, to succeed when others expected failure. But the encounter with the unknown aircraft had left her feeling more uncertain than ever about her place in the rapidly evolving world of military aviation. To key, young pilots in her formation looked to her for leadership and answers, but she had more questions now than when the mission had started. Who were those pilots? What country possessed such advanced aircraft? And why had they chosen to reveal their capabilities to her specifically? Most troubling of all was the nagging suspicion that this encounter had been orchestrated, that someone had wanted her to see those capabilities, for a reason she didn't yet understand. The storm system fell. Behind them, and clear skies opened up ahead. Sarah realized that her legendary career might be entering its most challenging chapter yet. The world of aerial combat was changing in ways she had never imagined, and she would need to adapt faster than ever before to remain relevant. The Admiral who had doubted her place in the sky was about to discover that her greatest adventures were still ahead of her. The secure debriefing room at Nellis Air Force Base had never hosted a meeting quite like this one. Admiral Sarah Chen sat at the head of the conference table, surrounded by intelligence analysts, Pentagon officials, and her 4 pilots, all trying to make sense of the extraordinary encounter they had just experienced. Colonel Matthews from Air Force Intelligence leaned forward, studying the sensor data displayed on multiple screens around the room. Admiral, these readings don't match anything in our database. The aircraft you encountered were using propulsion systems that appear to violate our understanding of current aerospace technology. Sarah nodded grimly. That's consistent with what we observed directly. The question is whether we're looking at a breakthrough by a known adversary or something else entirely. Captain Rodriguez raised her hand. Ma'am, there's something else that's bothering me about the encounter. The way they positioned themselves around you, it wasn't aggressive, but it wasn't random either. They seemed to know exactly what they wanted to accomplish. Explain that observation, Captain. Well, Admiral, they could have remained undetected if they had wanted to. The storm system provided perfect cover, and their stealth capabilities clearly exceed our detection threshold. But instead, they revealed themselves deliberately and engaged in what could only be described as aerial demonstration. Major Thompson nodded in agreement. Rodriguez is right. They wanted us to see their capabilities. The question is why. General Harrison's voice crackled through the secure communication system from the Pentagon. Sarah, we've been analyzing the coordinates those aircraft transmitted to you. The location they indicated is approximately 200 miles from the nearest claimed territorial waters. But satellite imagery shows no surface vessels or installations in that area. Sarah studied the nautical charts displayed on her tablet. General, could it be an underwater facility? The depth charts show a significant seamount in that region. Possible, but our sonar mapping of that area is incomplete. What concerns me more is the timing of this encounter. Intelligence suggests similar aircraft have been spotted near strategic installations in 3 different theaters over the past month. The implications were sobering. If advanced aircraft were conducting coordinated reconnaissance near multiple American installations, it suggested a level of organization and capability that represented a serious strategic threat. Dr. Elizabeth Warner from the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency had been silent throughout most of the briefing, but now she cleared her throat. Admiral Chen, I need to share some classified information that may be relevant to your encounter. Sarah nodded for her to continue. For the past 18 months, DARPA has been tracking reports of aircraft using propulsion technology that doesn't match any known development programs. The performance characteristics you described match theoretical models we've been working on, but we're at least 5 years away from practical application. Are you suggesting these aircraft represent technology from our own black programs, Dr. Warner? That's just it, Admiral, they don't. We've checked with every classified aerospace program in the Department of Defense. Nobody is working on anything that matches what you encountered. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. If the aircraft weren't American, and they exceeded the known capabilities of any potential adversary, where had they come from? Lieutenant Collins spoke up hesitantly. Ma'am, could these be test flights of some kind of international cooperation program? Maybe allied nations working together on advanced technology? Dr. Warner shook her head. We've verified with all our allies. No one is conducting tests that match these aircraft profiles. Sarah found herself thinking back to the encounter, replaying every detail in her mind. The precision flying, the deliberate communication through aerial maneuvers, the transmission of specific coordinates. It all suggested pilots who not only possessed advanced technology, but understood exactly how to use it. Dr. Warner, you mentioned theoretical models. What kind of performance envelope are we talking about? Based on your sensor data, these aircraft appear capable of acceleration rates that would incapacitate most pilots, maneuverability that exceeds anything we thought possible, and stealth characteristics that make them effectively invisible to our best detection systems when they choose to be. Captain Park had been studying the flight recordings intently. Admiral, there's something else I noticed. During the aerial demonstration, those pilots executed maneuvers that would require G-force tolerance beyond normal human limits. Either they have revolutionary pilot protection systems or— He didn't finish the sentence, but everyone in the room understood the implication. If the pilots weren't experiencing normal G-forces, it suggested technology that was truly revolutionary. General Harrison's voice cut through their speculation. Sarah, regardless of the technology involved, we need to know the intent behind these encounters. The coordinates they transmitted, we need to investigate that location. Sir, are you authorizing another mission? I'm authorizing whatever you think is necessary to get answers. But Sarah, this time we're not taking any chances. If you choose to investigate those coordinates, you'll have full support, additional aircraft, naval assets if needed, and authorization to take whatever action is necessary to protect yourself and your people. Sarah looked around the table at her pilots. Each face showed a mixture of excitement and apprehension. They had just experienced something that challenged their understanding of aviation technology, and now they were being asked to potentially face those same aircraft again under unknown circumstances. General, I need 12 hours to plan and prepare. This mission will require different tactics than our previous approach. You have whatever time you need, Admiral, but remember, national security may depend on the intelligence you gather. After the meeting ended and the room had cleared except for her 4 pilots, Sarah remained seated, staring at the coordinates displayed on the main screen. Those numbers represented more than just a location. They represented a challenge that could define the rest of her career. Admiral, Rodriguez said quietly, we're with you, whatever you decide. But those aircraft, they were clearly superior to anything we're flying. If we investigate those coordinates, we could be walking into a situation we're not equipped to handle. Sarah appreciated the young pilot's honesty. Rodriguez was right to be concerned. They could be flying into a trap designed by pilots who had already demonstrated superior technology and tactics, but Sarah also recognized an opportunity that might not come again. These mysterious pilots had revealed themselves for a reason, had transmitted specific coordinates for a purpose. If she didn't investigate, she might never get answers to questions that could affect the future of American air superiority. Rodriguez, Thompson, Collins, Park, I want you to understand something. What we encountered today changes everything we thought we knew about aerial combat and aviation technology. We can retreat to safe protocols and standard procedures, or we can take the risks necessary to understand what we're really dealing with. She stood up, decision made. I'm going to investigate those coordinates. Anyone who wants to volunteer for the mission can stay. Anyone who has reservations can step away with no questions asked and no impact on their record. All 4 pilots remained seated. Rodriguez spoke for the group. Admiral, we didn't come this far to back down now. Besides, someone needs to keep Phoenix out of trouble. For the first time since the encounter, Sarah smiled. These young pilots were about to face the unknown alongside her, and their trust meant everything. All right then, she said. moving to the tactical planning boards. Let's figure out how to investigate those coordinates without getting ourselves killed in the process. Because something tells me that wherever those aircraft came from, we're about to learn a lot more about the future of aviation than we bargained for. The coordinates led them to what appeared to be empty ocean. But as Sarah's formation descended through the cloud layer at dawn, the truth revealed itself in a way that left all 5 pilots speechless. Rising from the Pacific waters was a structure that defied immediate classification. Part aircraft carrier, part research facility, part something else entirely. The installation was massive, easily twice the size of the largest American carrier, but its design was unlike any naval architecture in current use. Sleek surfaces curved seamlessly into angular sections, creating a silhouette that seemed to blend organic and mechanical design principles. Most remarkably, the entire structure appeared to be floating several feet above the water's surface. Phoenix Lead. Reaper 2. Please tell me you're seeing this too. Rodriguez's voice carried a mixture of awe and disbelief. Sarah checked her instruments repeatedly, but the readings remained consistent. The structure ahead was real and it was operational. Aircraft were visible on what appeared to be flight decks, and personnel could be seen moving around various sections of the facility. All aircraft maintain current altitude and approach vector. No aggressive maneuvers, but stay ready for immediate evasive action. As they drew closer, Sarah could see that the aircraft on the facility's decks were similar to the ones they had encountered during their previous mission, but now there were more of them, at least 20 visible, with possibly more in enclosed hangar areas. Her radio crackled with an incoming transmission on the same emergency frequency the unknown aircraft had used before. But this time, instead of coded tones, she heard a voice speaking clear English with no discernible accent. Phoenix Flight, this is Meridian Station. You are cleared for approach and landing. Flight deck is prepared to receive your aircraft. Sarah felt her heart racing. Someone on that facility knew their call signs and was expecting their arrival. The coordinates hadn't been a random invitation. They had been a carefully planned rendezvous. Meridian Station. This is Phoenix Lead. Identify your nationality and authorization for operations in international waters. Phoenix Lead. All questions will be answered upon landing. Please follow the approach vectors being transmitted to your navigation systems. Sarah looked at her display and saw new waypoints appearing, creating a precise flight path to the facility's landing area. Whoever was controlling their systems had technology that could interface directly with F-22 avionics, something that should have been impossible. Major Thompson's voice cut through her thoughts. Phoenix Lead, this has to be some kind of classified American program. No other explanation makes sense, but Sarah's instincts told her otherwise. Everything about this situation felt different from any military operation she had ever encountered. The facility's design, the aircraft technology, even the communication protocols were unlike anything in her experience. Meridian Station, Phoenix Lead. Before we commit to landing, I need verification of your authority and mission. Admiral Chen, your reputation precedes you. We have been hoping to meet the pilot known as Phoenix for some time. Our mutual interests in aviation excellence brought us together. The use of her rank and real name sent chills down Sarah's spine. These people had extensive intelligence about her background and career. But their tone suggested cooperation rather than hostility. She made a decision that would have horrified her superiors. Phoenix Flight, prepare for landing approach. Stay alert and ready for immediate departure if the situation changes. The landing process was unlike anything Sarah had ever experienced. As her Raptor approached the facility, the landing surface began to glow with guidance lights that formed a perfect approach pattern. Her aircraft settled onto the deck with mechanical precision, guided by systems that seemed to anticipate her every control input. As her engines spooled down, Sarah saw personnel approaching her aircraft. They were wearing flight suits that appeared to be standard military issue, but with no visible national insignia or unit markings. Most surprisingly, they moved with the confident bearing of experienced aviation professionals. A woman who appeared to be in her 50s approached Sarah's aircraft as she climbed out of the cockpit. She had the weathered look of a career pilot, with graying hair and eyes that held the same intensity Sarah recognized in veteran aviators. Admiral Chen, welcome to Meridian Station. I'm Colonel Martinez, project director for this facility. Sarah remained cautious. Colonel Martinez, I need to see identification and authorization for this operation. My pilots and I are operating under direct Pentagon orders. Martinez smiled. Admiral, I understand your concern. But before we discuss authorization, I think you should see what we've been working on here. It will answer many of your questions about the aircraft you encountered. She gestured toward the facility's main structure. Up close, Sarah could see that the design incorporated elements that seemed decades ahead of current technology. The materials appeared to be some kind of advanced composite that shifted color slightly in the changing light. Colonel, are you telling me this is an American facility? Not exactly, Admiral. Meridian Station represents something new, a collaboration between the world's most advanced aviation programs, operating outside traditional national boundaries. The explanation raised more questions than it answered, but Sarah found herself curious despite her caution. If this facility represented some kind of international cooperation in advanced aviation, it could explain the extraordinary aircraft they had encountered. Rodriguez and the other pilots had joined them, their expressions showing the same mixture of amazement and uncertainty that Sarah felt. They were clearly in the presence of technology that exceeded anything in their training or experience. Colonel Martinez, the aircraft we encountered yesterday, they were from here. They were, Admiral, and the pilots who flew them specifically requested the opportunity to fly with you. Your reputation as an innovative tactician has spread beyond American military circles. Sarah felt a surge of pride mixed with apprehension. To be recognized by pilots operating the world's most advanced aircraft was an honor, but it also suggested her every move was being watched and analyzed. I'd like to see your operation, Colonel, but I need to understand exactly what I'm looking at and who's responsible for it. Martinez nodded. Of course, but Admiral, what you're about to see will change your understanding of the future of aviation. Are you prepared for that? Sarah looked back at her aircraft, then at her 4 pilots who were clearly as overwhelmed as she was by the situation. They had come here seeking answers about a potential threat to American security, but instead had discovered something that seemed to represent the future of international cooperation in military aviation. Colonel, I've spent my entire career adapting to new challenges and technologies. Show me what you've built here. As they walked toward the facility's main structure, Sarah realized that her doubts about her place in the sky had been completely misplaced. She wasn't becoming obsolete. She was being invited to help shape the future of aviation itself. The call sign Phoenix had brought her full circle, from uncertain admiral back to pioneering pilot. But the journey ahead promised to be unlike anything she had ever imagined. Behind them, her 4 pilots exchanged glances that mixed excitement with apprehension. They had followed their admiral into the unknown, and discovered that the future of flying was more extraordinary than any of them had dared to dream. As they entered Meridian Station, Sarah Chen knew that her legendary career was entering a new chapter, one where the sky was no longer the limit, but just the beginning.